What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning into this video. In this presentation, we're going to review the preseason that we just finished with the Nyon Rugby Club, the club that I work with here in Switzerland. We're going to go over everything we did on the physical prep side of things. Now the guys are going more into the rugby piece as the games and the season approaches. So let's go and review the sessions one by one. So first, the program. So we started with our team sessions on the 21st of July, and we were supposed to have until the 27th of August. So 20th and 27th of August, we're supposed to be prep sessions, physical prep sessions dedicated as well. But for due to unforeseen circumstances, we had to cancel those two big physical sessions. We have a friendly game tomorrow, which is the 28th, and we have one on September 4th, and then championship starts on the 12th. So it's time to get back to rugby. So we did work over 10 sessions total with the team, physical prep, and then they also had solo prep for 3 weeks before we started. So kind of a gentle program to come back from the long break due to COVID. And so they did that on their own, and then we went into the 21st of July as the first team session. Let's look at this one first. So session number one, it's written in French, but I'll translate. Warm up on the track. Then we did a half Cooper test. Half Cooper test does not help me determine whether or not they're fit for the game, but it does help me in a very simple way determine my groups, group 1, group 2, group 3 for our future tempo runs that we're going to be doing. So you can see here under 1250 on the test, you get to group 1, between 1250 and 1450, group 2, above 1450, you're in group 3. We ended the session with some light tempos or some touch rugby. It was there was choice there, and about half the guys picked tempos, so that was encouraging. Means that they actually appreciate the work that they're doing with them. So tempos with a little bit of crawling afterwards. That was session one. Session two, exactly the same format. Reason being that not everybody could be there on the Tuesday, but I wanted to have the most amount of guys possible do the test so that we had that data and we could organize our groups. So same thing, half Cooper test, and then onto some touch rugby or some tempo runs for those who wanted. Going into session 3, which was realistically our first full-on prep session, started with some incline sprints. So incline sprints on a hill. Started with 5 times 10 meters and 5 times 10 and then 5 times 20 meters, 60-second rest, 90-second rest, respectively. First session back, so the guys were not. I did ask them to hold the brakes a little bit and not go all out. So I told them between 85 and 90%, depending on how they were feeling. Continue with some tempo runs, 2 times 10 on a 60-second rolling clock. Group 1 ran 20 out, 20 back. Group 2 ran 20 out, 40 out, 20 back. Group 3 ran 40 out, 40 back, with a little bit of body weight work after each repetition, as you see in the video. A little bit of contact prep here. Thanks so much to Andy for his inspiration on that. Make sure you check out the full interview that I did with him if you haven't yet. But prep for contact before we get into tackling, before we even get into wrestling, making sure the upper body is ready and robust enough to take all those impacts and the intensity of that part of the game. So dedicated that part of training to contact prep. Also note that we only put the studs or the cleats back on after tempos. So they ran everything else with their runners on to reintroduce cleats slowly to avoid unnecessary injuries on the field of play. Session 4, similar sequence, sprints, hill sprints to start, as you see in the video here. Volume goes up a bit, 4 times 10, 6 times 20, 3 times 30, with the appropriate rest in between. And then we went on to tempo runs, change shoes, put the cleats on a little bit earlier than the previous session. Again, just working that time up slowly, gradually each session until we ended up in the session number 5, I believe, or number 6, with our cleats on the whole session. Tempo runs after that, we had 2 times 10, and the distances went up just a little bit from the previous session. So just volume moving up slowly. Same idea, a little bit of body weight work after the running. Not a very intense session, probably a 5 or 6 out of 10 for most guys. Did a little bit of contact prep afterwards. Again, as you can see here, a lot of specific positions. I got some good feedback from the guys on those movements. They said it really, worked the upper body and the shoulders and got them ready for the actual demands of the game afterwards. So that was a good addition to this year's prep that we didn't have last year. Last session on the hill sprints, if I'm not mistaken, pushing the volume again, pushing the distances. You can see the 6x30 here with a little bit of a varied start. So 3 meters, about 2 to 3 meters to change it up a little bit. And then tempo runs back on the pitch. And here we went to 3x6 every 70 seconds, bumped up the distances quite a bit. What I tried to do this year compared to last year is change the format of the tempo runs every session, or at least the distances, so that it was a little bit less monotonous for the guys. So add a little bit of variation, even though we're doing the same thing. It's not always on the same clock. It's not always with the same distances. Out and back. And yeah, that's another modification that I made this year, is that I cut all the tempo runs in two, where before we would run one time across the pitch. I'd always did a there and back, kind of a shuttle format. Here you can see some more contact prep, man to man this time, introducing a little bit of contact but no impacts yet. So you can see some 1v1 scrummaging, working on some pushing. Very good exercise to get the body ready for contact without doing some heavy tackling and heavy contact. I believe that was in the warm-up, but included a little bit of those bear walks and crawls in there. That's session 5 for you. Session number 6, now we're sprinting on flat ground, so moving up in intensity, changing up the starts as well. So starting here on their front, here they had to do a backward roll into a sprint, and we did some 10-meter sprints and some 20-meter sprints. They could play pass, play ball between sprints if they wanted to. There was enough time. Always allocate enough time between sprints. So you could see again here, step back, lateral step back, and then here facing backwards, starting into the sprint. I believe they're on 20 meters here. Tempo runs 3x8, 60-second rolling clock. Again, distances change a little bit. Volume is going up slowly. Again, not super hard, probably a 7 out of 10 for most guys on this session. And then moving into contact prep, we have a nice little hill next to the pitch, so we leverage that for our crawls before we went into our wrestling. That was actually a really good exercise. The guys enjoyed it. And you can also see here, let me just move back to this one. And then here, okay, man to man. So there's some stand-up kind of exercises where one's on top of the other. You have to try and prevent the other one from standing up. Some wrestling on the knees. Again, reduces a little bit the intensity and the amplitude of movements compared to standing. And we finish with a little race, fireman carry, and some wheelbarrows on the way back. Fun little team challenge. Everybody had some fun. Ludo and Louis won this one, so that was a good one. Session number 7. No, they're not dead. They're just warming up. Warm up on the pitch. Cleats the whole way through on this one. Flat sprints, flat ground sprints, 2x10, 2x20, 3x30, with varied starts as well. Here you can see the different sprints. So starting from a shuffle, starting from a push-up position, trying to alternate, trying to add some variation. The guys appreciated that. And then it's going to look a little bit more like what they do on the pitch. Again, lots of rest between those sprints. I made sure, especially after the 30s, that they got plenty of rest, because it's important, especially when you develop it, that they maintain a high intensity on all reps and not, again, sacrifice intensity for fatigue, because it's not the goal on those sprints. Here we have our tempo runs, 3x8. Some good distances covered here on this session. That was a pretty tough session. Always a 60-second rolling clock. Oh, not always, but here's a 60-second rolling clock. 3-second rest between sets. That's a pretty standard procedure. 40-40, 50-50, and 60-60 for the 3 groups. And then we ended up with some more contact prep, some more wrestling games, as you can see here. 1v1 on the shoulder. Andy, again, thank you for all of those ideas. It's fantastic. The guys loved it. A little bit of wrestling man-to-man here. As you can see, again, getting them ready for the contacts that are to come in future sessions. Session number 8, Here we had some flying sprints for the first time. I hadn't done them last year, but this year I felt like we had the appropriate progression to then integrate those. I did not do 10 and 20 meters like I wrote down on the left. I did 5 for the forwards and 10 meters for the backs with 2-minute rest in between. They took about 20 meters speed to get into their flying sprint, and they appreciated that. It was some good quality work. I just asked them to try and maintain as good a running posture as possible on that small segment. And again, really trying to touch those high intensities, high velocities with the guys, just preparing the bodies for what they might encounter in the game. Tempo session, again, 3x8, 60 seconds, slightly different distances for all the groups. Again, just switching it up a little bit. I think that's the most volume we did. No, sorry, the session 7 was the most volume we did. So that was just a little bit below, but still pretty decent intensity on everything. Here's another one. Here's another one. A little bit of contact prep at the end here, as you can see. Going on to session 9. So changed the format quite a bit on this one compared to before. I had planned, like I said, 4 hard sessions. So session 9, 10, 11, and 12 were going to be really hard. Unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, session 10 and session 12 fell through. And so we stayed with just 2 of those kind of integrated sessions where I tried to run some kind of circuit that would somewhat replicate the demands of the game. So the forwards, as you can see, front rows and then second and third rows ran on a 45-second clock, while the backs ran on a 60-second clock. The forwards did 4x8, while the backs did 3x8. Obviously, the backs did a lot more running. As you can see, they do a shuttle, and then they do down and up, and then they do their tempo run. Whilst the forwards do a lot more wrestling, especially the front rows. Out of the 8 intervals, they'll do 1, 2, 3, 4 wrestling or grappling type exercises, and they'll do 3 tempos, and they'll do 1 sprint. Second, third row will do 2 sprints, 1, 2 wrestling, and then 4 tempos. So that was one little thing that we changed compared to last year. Again, moving on to the backs here, shuttle, down and up, and then run for their respective distances. I was happy with the intensity of this session for the backs, not for the forwards though. That was my fault. I didn't plan as well as I thought I did. The intensity wasn't high enough for the front rows especially. So what I did on session 10 is I added a little bit more running after all their wrestling exercises. So you can see I added 20 meters out, 20 meters back, when before it was just a 20-meter jog. And changed the second row, third row format for the shuttle, where they do, and you might see it here, they'll do some wrestling. Then they go into their jog. Again, some sprints integrated in there. The idea was that they're going to have to sprint in a game and they're going to be tired, so they need to be able to do it safely. So that's how I integrated those sprints. Lateral shuffle, down and up for the second, third rows, and then their run. And then for the backs, more just tempo and alternating tempos and wrestling on those sessions. Auto-critique, I think it's important to try and be as objective as possible on what I did, and then to obviously do better next year. So positives for me were communication. I planned ahead. I made a little presentation like I'm doing now for the players, explaining the progression, explaining what we were doing and why, explaining what would be expected of them in each segment of each session, setting goals for each segment of each session as well, in terms of intensity, in terms of feeling, whether it's RPE or speed or again, times to hit, so that they knew exactly what they had to do. I was happy with the structure as well, having integrated more of that contact prep and wrestling element, which I hadn't done last year, which I think was lacking. So in my mind, that was a good addition, having the sprints, having the conditioning, and then having the contact prep was very good this year. The specific work that we were able to do for the front rowers and then the forwards in general, a lot more specific prep for contact, which again was lacking last year in my opinion. And the numbers that we had, we were between 33 and 40 guys every practice, take into account that except for those last 2 hard sessions where we mixed half rugby, half physical with me, all the previous 8 sessions were only with me, so it was an hour and a half of just physical prep, and the guys showed up and did the work, so that's fantastic. Things to work on, sorry, from my perspective, the intensity on those last sessions, in my opinion, was not high enough. I would have liked it to be higher. Again, we should have had 4 of those sessions back to back. We only had 2 at week intervals, which does have a big impact on the feeling or on what the guys are going to feel from those sessions. If you do a Tuesday, Thursday, and then Tuesday, Thursday again is very different than doing just a Tuesday and then the following Tuesday again. So something I'll have to work on for next week, next year, not next week. Specific work, I would like to do more of it. I think trying to integrate some kind of pick and go work with a stopwatch, and while managing and monitoring the different parameters that I'm looking after, work to rest ratios, effort, all those, volume, all those things, I think might be beneficial for the guys next year. And then the duration of the prep to work on. We did 5 weeks in total here, so 10 sessions. Could it have been longer? Probably. But does it need to be longer? That's the question I'm going to wait to answer until they actually play and see how they feel. If they feel really good out of, from 5 weeks of prep, then I know that next year we just need to do that. Maybe a smidge more, but not much. And then they can just play the game and they'll be ready physically. And then they can just focus on the tactical for the rest of the prep. So we'll see that when the first games come up. Player feedback, I sent a little questionnaire to all the players, asked them for feedback on the prep. It was an anonymous questionnaire, so they could say whatever they wanted, positive, negative. I asked for what you liked, what you didn't like, and then suggestions. So I let them kind of go at it. I got a good 20 replies from all the guys, so I appreciate that. Positives that came through were the progression from session to session. There was that kind of thought out progression between the sessions in terms of volume, in terms of intensity, in terms of the work that was performed, and they really appreciated that. They appreciated the structure of the sessions as well. It was on time, it was run properly, organized, so they appreciated that. I got some really good feedback from all the contact prep specific work that we did that we hadn't done in the last year. So I got some good feedback from the guys telling me that that was a good addition to what we had done so far. Things to work on from the point of view of the players, a bit more variation in the sessions. So it's true that it was very similar in terms of sprint, tempo, prep for contact. For me, those 3 elements were absolutely indispensable. And so, I sequenced them like this every time, and I wouldn't have taken anyone out. But it's true that I can probably dig a little bit deeper and find some ways to vary the work to make it a bit more interesting for the guys. Ball in play, they want to see more ball as always because they're amateur players and they like to play the game. And obviously there's nothing wrong with that. It's my job to now try and integrate more rugby games in the conditioning setting. So that's something I'd like to work with the coaches towards for next year to try, like I said before, whether it's pick and goes, whether it's open play for the backs, just some more rugby, but again, with an eye on the stopwatch so that we can get the efforts that we want from them, get the quality, get the work, progress the work from session to session while still having a ball, playing rugby. That would be the dream. So it's something I'll be working towards next year. And I'm already starting to think about ways that we can do that to work on intensity again that came through, especially for the forwards on those last couple sessions, not as intense as it could have been. So again, that's my fault for not planning as well as I could have. But we learn and we move forward. Modifications to come, like I mentioned previously, integrated fitness. So can we do more ball in play? Can we do more rugby while still getting some conditioning effects without it going to shit and just doing, an hour of 7-on-7 on a big pitch right from the start? I think there is an in-between. I think there is a way to integrate it. I think it's obviously a lot more complicated than just running a tempo session, but I think it's something for me to work towards to get more knowledgeable about. I'm lucky to have really great coaches here that can help me and that are ready to work as a team to try and get the team to in the best shape possible. So if I tell them that I need their help to think of games or structures that will allow us to get certain adaptations out of them, then I'm sure they'll be happy to help. So something I'll be working on towards next year. Grappling intensity, I would have liked to see a bit more, and that came through from the front rows especially. The wrestling was too easy for them, even in the conditioning setting where they had some runs in between and some sprints and all those things. So something to work on for me again. How do we make that more intense, more difficult? Do we do 2v2 on the scrums? Do we do, you know, do we put a ball in the wrestling that I have to rip? Something to think about and work on. And then again, the duration. I'm interested in seeing how ready they feel for the game after this year, and then see if we can do with less physical prep so that they can play more rugby afterwards. But again, if already we can integrate some of the running and some of the fitness work in a rugby setting, that would be monumental in the sense that we could start rugby from day one and just have, for me, that sprint phase or sprint portion and contact prep portion have to remain as such, especially in the first few weeks, just to get to the intensities and the adaptations that we want. But the conditioning honestly could be rugby based. We just have to do it intelligently. So things to work on in the future. Like I said, we'll see what comes out of the coming games and draw our conclusions from there. Guys, thanks so much for getting to the end of that presentation. I really appreciate you watching. Please take a second to like, share, and subscribe. If you have any comments, questions, please post them below this video. I'll be happy to answer. As always, thanks for watching, thanks for following, and see you soon for the next one. Take care.